Hello, my name is Sue Crampton. In this session I'm going to be covering simple career development tools, hopefully to help to support you in your quest for team excellence. In the first slide you'll notice that there's a slide with 4 boxes with an underpinning training, coaching and mentoring. Let me just walk you through that. In the first box you'll see that there's job descriptions. Now what this does is it talks about what you want the staff or team member to actually do. So the key word there is what. When you look directly beneath that you'll see that there's a box called policies and procedures, and that's basically talking about what specifically do you want them to do in their task as per their job description. So the key word there really is how. You'll see there's a box called performance reviews, and that's how well are they doing what you want them to do. So the key word there is measure. And when you talk about underneath that is legislation, and that's what you must have in place no matter what country or what state that you are in. Then all of that is underpinned by training, coaching and mentoring. And for me what this does is it looks at the staff management architecture that we need within our practices. What I'm going to do is to go straight into talking about the value of career and performance development. You'll see here again 4 boxes and 4 specific areas that are important for us to consider with developing our team. Employee attraction is absolutely key. People like to work with companies or businesses or practices that actually do support and develop their employees. Of course, what happens here is we're able to retain key valuable employees, and we're also making sure that we engage our employees and keep them motivated against the vision and values of the practice. And of course making sure that their performance and productivity is in alignment with what we're requiring. One of the things I've found particularly useful is what we call a gaps analysis, which is basically identifying with the employees where you want to go and where you are now. What this is doing is a personal development planning session, which is a roadmap to success. Now let us just go through this. When we talk about a gaps analysis, what we're doing is we're looking at the goals which we're able to identify long and short term goals as individuals. We're going to be looking at success factors, looking at specifically things like qualifications, experience and personal attributes that we need or that you need your employee to have as they move forward. We're then going to look at attributes and being able to conduct a self-assessment of how you think you fit against those success factors. And also looking at the perceptions, obtaining feedback from others on how they think that you fit within this particular role and against those objectives. So let's have a look at the gaps analysis slide. If you look at goals, success, abilities and perceptions, let's take the time to write underneath goals, step 1. We look under success, step 2. Under abilities, step 3. And under perceptions, step 4. Also consider where it says abilities and perceptions, that's really discussing where I am now. And under goals and success is where I want to go. So if we have a look at step 1, what we might do is we might identify, or our team member might identify, long and short term goals. So you would be asking your team member what actually is their dream job. What is their short term and long term goals? So hypothetically it could be to become the practice manager at your practice by a certain date, for example December 2013. So actually working with the employee to understand what it is that they're requiring from their career. Step 2, looking at the success. What you're doing there is looking at some key success factors that employee might actually need. So for example, looking at what kind of qualifications that they might need as prerequisites for the role. So if they're wanting to be a practice manager, maybe they need to have a frontline management course to achieve that. What experience do they need? And again there, if you're looking at the goal of your employee or your team member, it could be that they've got significant experience as a senior nurse in a large practice or a head nurse in a smaller practice. So what skills are required to perform the job? So if you're looking at somebody wanting to be a practice manager, how much experience have they had dealing with people and teams and motivating other team members? And what are some of the behavioural competencies and personal attributes that they need to show? And what kind of personal cultural traits are required? So if we keep looking at step 2, there's lots of areas that we can get this information from. So we can get that from our job descriptions, we can look at our competency sets within the practice, you can look at the value sets within the practice, you can look at other individuals in that role, and you can actually get feedback from the manager as well. One of the things that's really important in terms of encouraging your team members to develop is to actually have them do a self-assessment. And this is really critical. So in step 3, where we look at their abilities, get them to rate themselves against what actually is required. So actually, how do they feel that they rate against their qualification, their experience, their skills and their personal attributes? Now obviously tools to assist this is the latest performance review that they've had, their current job description, their reflection on their own performance, or their resume which they may use to turn to. And if we look at step 4, where we're looking at those perceptions, we find that one of the most important things to do is actually to get feedback and perception from others. So if we look at that from an employee or team member point of view, and you can get feedback from the manager, from other internal colleagues and team members, veterinarians, nurses, receptionists, and from external colleagues as well. So again, the key thing here is encouraging that team member or the employee to look at any of their latest performance reviews, any informal feedback that they've received, or they could actually themselves seek selected targeted information and feedback from selected colleagues. So then what you start to see is this example here, is you start to see the abilities and the goals and the perceptions and the success. And if you recall, what we were saying was that the step 1 is the goal, step 2 is what is success, step 3 is looking at the abilities that you need, and step 4 is looking at the perceptions. So what you're able to do, you're starting to see that there's a gap between where I am now and where I want to go. So when you're developing your own team members, you're looking at, well, where am I now and where do I want to go as an individual within your practice? So as a result of doing that, then you can work with that employee to create a personal development plan. So what you can do is, by looking at that gaps analysis, you can start to look at some success factors to develop. So what we suggest that you do is that you select those development actions to undertake, and you decide how you're going to monitor the plan. So when you're working with your employee or team member, you're actually asking them to do a self-assessment. They're looking at their gaps analysis, where I am now and where I want to be. And as a result of some of the areas that they need to develop, they're actually deciding how best to do that to meet their objectives and their goals. So one of the things that we suggest that you do with your team member is, step 1 is to select success factors to develop. So some of these considerations in deciding what areas to work on are, like, what actually are the goals, what are the goals of the organisation, what time is needed, and what resources are needed. And what we also think about is that step 2 is selecting development actions to undertake. And what we usually find is we think, well, there's always going to be entailing some reading, some training, and some self-actions. And one of the gentlemen I work with is very good at this. And he always says to me, Sue, I know I need to do some reading so I can keep my current competency up and research more. I need to apply it. And then what I want to do is hold myself responsible. So everyday actions is, every time I see that I do a certain thing, this is how I need to correct that. So he actually takes strong self-responsibility for his development. So step 3 is then deciding how you're going to monitor that plan. And as you can see by this slide here, a successful development is we want to make sure that we are committed to that. We want to make sure that we've got some discipline. We want to make sure that we get rewarded by getting recognition and acknowledgement of the things that we're actually achieving. So if you're working with your team member, you want to make sure that you are providing them with support and making sure that you are recognising their efforts. You can see here on this slide that there is a development plan example, and you'll see also one that's completed, where quite clearly what it's saying is, as a result of the fact I want to be a practice manager in your practice and there is an opportunity for that, then what are some of the things I need to do? What I need to do is I need to make sure, for example, that I set up feedback sessions with the partners and managers in the practice. And what I need to do is communicate with the partner and jot down some ideas before I go into the meeting so I can stay on track and make sure that I support my manager. So there's a couple of examples, and you'll see there's a box there called Monitor Actions, and it's basically a self-check for the employee to actually monitor their own actions. One of the things I think you should also be very aware of is the importance of the VAK. And the VAK is visual, auditory and kinesthetic. One of the things here, guys, that's very important is to understand that if you write show, tell and do, understanding that every single person has a different style of learning. Some people are very visual, some people are very auditory, and some people are very kinesthetic. So when you're actually training and coaching people, you make sure that you actually get them to show, tell and do. And when you are training, using show, tell and do. So I trust that this has been of value to you. Thank you very much for attending this particular session. As I said before, what it was about is just making sure that you have a very strong yet simple career development tool. And I do hope that this gaps analysis and development plan is of some use to you. Thank you very much for your time, and feel free to contact us if we can be of any further help. Thank you.